I found myself doing something that I had done many times before, and that was I was delivering construction supplies. Now, most of my life I have spent doing missions work and construction work of some sort, remodeling, and so forth. And that often includes delivery of building supplies. In this case, I was in a third world situation, delivering building supplies. I want to tell you about that experience. We traveled with a van and a trailer loaded with construction materials. And we traveled on roads that were first paved, and then they were paved but not as good quality. And then the next thing you know, they're what I would call a gravel or dirt road. And then we came to a location where there was no more road. And in that spot, we found a river. And at that river, we had arranged for boats. And these boats were for the purpose of taking our construction supplies further down the road, down the river. So the adventure was amazing because here we are. I'm used to a truck pulls up at my work site, or I have my own, pickup and trailer or whatever loaded with materials, and you pull up at a work site and you deliver them, unload them, and you get to work. In this case, the delivery took a full day. In fact, the day got long. In fact, you know what? Now that I'm telling this story, it was actually 2 days because we got to the location, the spot where the road ended and where the river was. And at that spot, we had to figure out, and so that took a whole day just to travel to that spot and then to begin to sort out how do we get this material on these boats. Some of it was simple because you could pick it up. It was lumber and so forth, and we could pick it up and carry it. And there was a bit of a slope down to the river, so you'd carry it down the slope and put it in the boats. But part of what we were doing on this particular trip is we were going to dig a well. The idea was, and I don't remember, I think this had been done before, but not a lot because it's difficult. But the idea is we had these concrete culverts. And I know you can't see all of this table, but you can probably see enough of it to get an idea that, they weren't huge culverts, but they were probably the size of this table. They were pretty good sized. And if you don't know what a culvert is, it's concrete that's shaped in the shape of a pipe, right? But big. And so we had these culverts that were about that big around and probably, 2 foot tall or so. And we had to figure out how to get these on the boat. They're not light. Concrete's never light. Concrete's always a challenging thing because of the weight of it. So we had the advantage, as I mentioned a minute ago, of a bit of a slope going down to the river, but you also that's an advantage. But you also don't want those things getting to rolling too fast, roll right into the river, you lose them, right? So we had rigged up a situation where we had boards going from the boat onto the bank, and we figured out a way that we could roll these concrete culverts down the hill in a safe manner to where they didn't get going too fast and nobody got hurt. You're always thinking about these things. And we successfully begin the process of rolling these down the hill. You'd get to those boards that were on the bank across to the boat. You'd roll them across the board. And then these are fiberglass boats that we're working with, so you're not wanting to damage those either. And we would carefully, with boards and multiple people, endeavor to roll those culverts into that boat to where it would sit in there safely so we could take it down the river. That all in itself was, man, quite the journey, quite the experience to take these things and to get them to that point. If I remember right, we didn't even finish that in the first day. We finished loading the next morning. Then the job was to, and this was certainly easier, but man, had some grand adventure to it, was to depart and go down this river, the river where the roads had ended. And now to go further, to go deeper into the jungle. Oh, no, and by the way, I didn't tell you that. I said I was in a third world country, but we were also in a tropical location. I can tell you, we were in Costa Rica and we were on our way to Nicaragua where we were building a church. And I've described to you, we had these concrete culverts for the well. We were going to dig a well down into the ground, and we were going to dig down and then set these down in there, so it created a structure, a wall structure, and they could have a well of fresh water. So, missions work is often viewed as maybe glamorous, is maybe, we love the stories where people are born again and where true heart ministry and impact occurs. And we love those for a right reason. I mean, they're wonderful stories. But there's also the practical side of things where you need a well, you need fresh water so that people can be in a location where they can worship and study and learn and grow and experience the amazing hand of God, right? So we're headed down the river. We're headed down these jungly, when you think jungle, you think lots of foliage, and we're headed into something that just was such a new experience, for me. I mean, I'm from Colorado. I've spent a good bit of my life in Colorado, and most of my construction has been either in Colorado or Florida for the most part. And in those two locations, it's really not tropical. Florida's wetter than Colorado, but it's not tropical. Not like Central and South American tropical. So we're headed down the river. We've got these boats loaded with these building materials, and at that point, it's about experiencing the journey, and the monkeys that are up in the trees, and the birds, and you're seeing fresh fruit such as bananas just hanging there on trees, just out in the middle of jungle wilderness. Amazing to experience that. And of course, there's crocodiles, or they alligators. I don't know the difference there. I should. I think they were crocodiles, but maybe some of you can set me straight on that. In the river. So you're watching, you're paying attention. There's snakes, there's spiders, there's ants, there's big kitties like jaguars. There's all this wildlife and all the plant life, and oh my goodness, just so much to take in. And we're going down the river with our building supplies. We get to the location after a couple of hours on the river. We get to our location where this church is being built, where people are being saved, and there's a church beginning, and therefore a church building needed. Amazing, great experience. We unload these building supplies, which in itself, you can imagine now, as is the case, in most situations, the river's in a lower spot, right? So we had the benefit of going downhill into the boat when we loaded. Now, when we're unloading, guess what we're doing? We're going uphill. And it was a pretty good bank. It was a bigger bank at the final location, the destination, than it was where we loaded them. So unloading was a chore. But we got it done. We got there, we got everything, rolled up the hill, and then of course the lighter stuff, the lumber and stuff, we were carrying up the hill. And we get it to a location where it's safe, where it can be stored, because later the well would be dug and so forth. We weren't there to do it that time. We were just delivering building supplies. Remember, we're in day 2 at this point. And finally, time is ticking along. We finally get everything unloaded, and we were not prepared to spend the night out there in the jungle. Remember, there's no building yet. There's not a well for fresh water. We were only going to deliver the building supplies and then head back. And, for me, I'm in a completely foreign environment. I don't know what's going on. This is all new to me. And if I needed to navigate back up these rivers, be pretty tricky for me to do so. So I start hearing conversation. And what I just said, it'd be pretty tricky for me to do so. It would have been nearly impossible. I don't know this area. I don't know how to navigate up these rivers and so forth. We had people with us that do know that. But it was starting to get dark, starting to get to evening. But it was important that we get back. And there were people concerned, though, about navigating the river in the dark, because there's just inherently more risk. Even if you know the rivers, there's just inherently more risk. So I could hear conversation. Remember, we haven't even left the delivery site yet. I'm hearing conversation about concern about getting us back to the place where our van and trailer and everything were before evening, before dark, right? So we finally we get started. We get started up the river, and we're making it along. We're making our way, and we pull off to the side. And I'm like, what's going on? He said, oh, one of the guys lives here. And I'm like, he lives here? I mean, remember, we're out in the jungle. We're on a river. We're at a place where there are no more roads. The river is the road, right? And he said, yeah, he lives right here. We pull over, and sure enough, there's a house or two right up in there. And he's got a couple flashlights. He's going to go grab those, and they're going to endeavor to get us on up the river. Even if it gets dark, they're going to take that risk because we've got these flashlights, and they're going to try to get us back to our vehicle. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful that we're going to do this, and yet, I'm like, man, how much risk is this? How bad is this? I mean, if we would hit something or hit another boat or a log or something, and our boat sinks, what I don't know. I don't know what the possibilities are here and how risky this actually is. So we gather these flashlights at this guy's house, and we head on up, and it's getting darker and darker. Pretty soon the flashlights come on, and they're going slower because they're really watching for things. They're listening for other boats and so forth. And we're making it up. And guess what? It starts raining. Which, for some people, including I think some of these who were helping us, that's a normal part of the journey, normal part of life. For me, remember I said I'm from Colorado. It's so dry. If it starts raining, we roll everything up. We don't keep working. We don't keep playing or anything out in the rain typically, But we're in these boats. We're headed up the river. It's dark, and it starts raining, and we keep going. And it's just it was just really quite the experience. Partly because it was all new, unknown territory and unfamiliar to me, right? But I was so thankful. My heart was filled because all we were doing is delivering building supplies, and yet we were delivering building supplies for the purpose of a church, to the benefit of believers. Man, to me it was just such an honor, and I was happy to be able to do this. So we're almost back to our spot, where our vehicle is and so forth, and we, I don't know. I just was so thankful. And even in the midst of the rain and so forth, and the sense of risk, the sense of danger, the potential fear and apprehension, where I like adventure. So for me, it wasn't really too bad. I kind of like some of that unknown. I like that adventure. I like the risk. So it was a great experience. It honestly was. But we got back to our location and our van and so forth, but it was dark, as I've said, and it had been raining. So we determined it's not smart for us to continue on down the road in our vehicle. Instead, we would stay there for the night. And we had a little bit of food there, plus we had the vehicle for shelter, and so that is what we did. We spent the night there at the river's side, and we did our best to dry off and have a little bit of food, and then to get a little bit of sleep, knowing that by morning we could head on up the road. Hopefully things hadn't washed out and so forth. So why do I tell you this story? The applications could be any number of applications. For you, I hope you find an application, something you can apply to your life. That's the point in Catalyst Chronicles, is for me to tell these stories, which is a lot of fun. Thank you for watching. But it's also just the adventure of the story, and then how it applies to life. How is it a catalyst in our lives for change? For me, that was a great experience, one like I had never had in building delivery, supply delivery, and to be able to experience the chore, the energy, the complication of what it takes to do something like that. I respected many that had gone before me and the efforts that they had done in much more difficult situations and scenarios and much more risk to their life, much more danger than what I had experienced. And it made me thankful. It made me thankful that I could participate. I was honored to participate in the building of God's kingdom in this manner, even though it was such a simple task. And I was honored by those that have gone before me. I was honored by those that we were blessing. You know, they were so appreciative, so thankful. And in years to come, I would meet more and more of those people, and I would actually see that well get dug and those culverts installed and a church physically built there. Great, great, great to see that and participate in that. So I don't know how you apply this to your life. For you, for me, it leaves me um, thankful for what I have day to day, thankful that I get to participate in God's kingdom, and sometimes it's tough and sometimes it's not. I'm more okay with the tough spots because of experiences like this. I understand that some things are difficult and they're worth it. And I appreciate that I have that perspective and that view. It makes me push through at times when maybe I don't want to. It makes me willing even more to do things that are unknown, that are difficult, that are dangerous, even for the sake of the kingdom. For you, it might be a simpler application in your day to day life. And I don't mean simpler negative. I mean, I just hope that you can find a place to where you can reach in and say, you know what? Yeah, I can take this on. This is bigger than me, and I can take it on. And that could be so many different things that would bring value to your life and those around you. My prayer is that the Holy Spirit will speak to you a truth and an application from this story. And I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you for participating and watching with me today. I am very thankful. And it's an honor for me to tell these stories. And it's fun to know that people are listening as well. So God bless you all. Thank you.